Dark Souls, recently named the best game of all... Wait, I've already done this bit back in the Kingdom Hearts video. Okay, maybe I'll get to the point a little faster this time. Howdy, I'm Prakuza, and welcome to DevBox, where we look at our favorite games and see what makes them tick. Today, that means looking back at the retro title Evergrace and observing the place it takes in gaming history. Hey everybody, wanted to interrupt real quick to let you know that DevBox has a Patreon now. We'll talk more about it at the end of the video, but for now, if you'd like to support the channel, the link is in the description. Alright, back to the video. Hey, who was Evergrace developed by again? Oh right, then I guess the Dark Souls opening isn't all that out of the blue then, huh? Yeah, so while most players are well aware of the Kingsfield series that Demon Souls and Dark Souls act as a spiritual successor to, there are a few other titles in between that the majority of fans might not be entirely privy to. This is where Evergrace finds itself, in the liminal space between Kingsfield and Demon Souls. Although, it also lacks any of the unique claims to fame that the other titles in this space hold, such as Shadow Tower Abyss's gunplay mechanics, or the graphic horror of Kuon. However, for me personally, Evergrace does have one uniquity about it. This is one of the two games that came bundled with my PS2 when I was a kid. So, this is actually my first experience with FromSoftware as a developer. Even if I never beat it when I first got it, and put way more time into Armored Core later on into the PS2 era. So, running back through this game, and actually finishing it for the first time, was one part cathartic, and another part an old weight off my shoulders. It's a well overdue item on my backlog that finally gets checked off after literally 20 years. Fuck, I'm old. Has it been a minute? Am I gonna have to censor the fuck I'm old? Let's start with what everyone clicked on this video in the first place for. The title that claims Evergrace to be the proto-ELDEN ring. As might be obvious from the footage you've seen so far, this is not because of the open world design, which this game does not have, but the various weapons and their unique skills. Similar to Elden Ring's Ashes of War and Dark Souls 3's weapon art before it, the strength of the combat comes down to the unique attacks available to each weapon. In the case of Evergrace, these are called Palmyra actions, and they can range from simple guards to extremely powerful combos. Some Palmyra actions can also be used to traverse the world, sometimes bypassing traps, and other times opening up access to new areas. For most of the game, Palmyra is going to be a constant part of the player's toolkit, and a constant worry. See, every time a Palmyra action is used, the player is hit, or the player simply hits an enemy, a small amount of the weapon or armor Palmyra is drained. Think of this like weapon and armor durability, but akin to Dark Souls 2, and every enemy is sin, because Palmyra drains extremely quickly. Fortunately, recovering the Palmyra of this gear isn't too bad, since there are multiple ways to do this. Either by using Biliana extracts, which can be bought in shops, or by simply going to the shops and repairing right there. Of course, it can't always be that easy, since this is FromSoftware we're talking about, deep in the middle of the Shadow Tower era too. Yes, so it also turns out that it isn't a great idea to let a weapon or armor piece to completely run out of Palmyra, since that heavily increases the cost of repairs. Given that broken gear completely removes the attack and defense benefits while also restricting the use of Palmyra actions, keeping this topped off is vital for progressing through an area, and swapping gear before it breaks will keep from burning through cash and needing to farm. In fact, across my entire playthrough, I actually never had to really farm up money or materials to keep my gear stocked up. That also means I didn't play with the super expensive stuff, but honestly, any gear can get you through this one. Now, that's how the Palmyra actions work. What about the rest of the game? How does that play out? Well, it's hard to call this standard fare for a Souls-like, aside from the fact that it is pretty difficult. It's early PS2 era, so gone are the days of tank controls, but we're still a little ways away from the right stick becoming the ubiquitous ruler of the camera. Like, if you thought the Dark Souls and On games had rough camera controls, this is an especially clunky one, since any press of R1 immediately resets the camera to look straight forward. There's an ability to freely look around by holding R1 and pressing the D-pad, but it isn't much better. That being said, it isn't that difficult to get used to, as long as you can fight off the muscle memory of more modern titles. Combine the rough camera controls with the fact that enemies spawn seemingly at random, sometimes out of view of the camera, and sound cues become incredibly important if you don't want to get caught off guard. Sure would be a shame if my recording setup was so jank that I couldn't listen to the game audio while recording it. Quite the shame to be that unfamiliar with capture setups. Another sign of its age is the buttons for attacking. Instead of the tried and true R1 for light attack and R2 for heavy, Evergrace follows the old action standard of square to attack, with triangle handling the Palmyra actions we talked about before. Additionally, there's no dodge or parry, and guarding is a weapon-specific Palmyra action. There's also no real stamina meter, at least not in the traditional sense. So, from a certain method of defining the genre, Evergrace barely even qualifies as a Souls-like, only really earning the title by being made by FromSoftware. However, even without a traditional stamina bar, Evergrace does have its own unique way of mitigating attack spamming, with the pace of the game even changing depending on how damaged the player is. You may have noticed by now that as I attack, the bar at the bottom left drains from 100% all the way down to 0. Then, after a second, it recharges and fills back up to 100 again. This power bar is a bit misleading at first, since it looks solely like a stamina bar, but it is actually the player character's current health, while the percentage indicates the amount of damage that the next attack is going to deliver. At 100%, it'll deal maximum damage, and if the player attacks before the bar has completely refilled, it will only do damage up to the percentage that has been recharged. This means that spamming attacks will have diminished returns, as any attack that comes too soon after the previous will include a heavy reduction in damage, depending on how quick square is mashed. The result is a steady pace to combat, where maximizing damage is a matter of getting the next hit off at the precise moment that the stamina meter reaches 100% again. Or, if you're a coward like me, single hit-and-run tactics dominate, dealing maximum damage followed up by running out of an enemy's range before turning around and doing it again. It almost incentivizes slow, heavy weapons, since quick combos are not only less powerful, they get weaker the faster the player tries to attack. There is a twist on this formula though, since the power meter is tied directly to the player character's health, with an inverse relationship between the potential speed of attacks and damage taken. See, if the bar is lower, it doesn't limit the amount of damage capable of being dealt down to that percentage of the total, but instead reduces the amount of time before the stamina reaches 100% again, based on how much of the health bar is left. This means that being at low health can help faster weapons attack more frequently without taking a reduction in damage output. Think of it like a version of the red tearstone ring, but instead of a raw damage increase, it has a potential improvement to DPS if you're aggressive enough. As someone who loves risk-reward tactics, this is actually an incredible way to design stamina management and make aggressive play viable, but extra risky. I'm not sure if this is around in some other Souls-like or an indie Metroidvania somewhere, but if it is, please point me in that direction. I'd love to see this utilized again in something new. Also to note about combat is the healing items, something that has become a staple of the genre since Dark Souls, although Evergrace takes a much more standard approach with the mechanic. Similar to Bloodborne, health items are a consumable resource that have to be either found or purchased from the shop and do not replenish when resting or after dying. So, in dire circumstances, farming for heals is absolutely still a thing here. Additionally, dying doesn't put you back at the last checkpoint, you actually still have to reload a save. We're not quite in the Dark Souls era yet. Now, all the interesting player-centered mechanics in the world is still only half the equation for good combat. The other end is the enemies. So, how do Evergrace's enemies hold up? Well, some are fine, while others are almost nostalgically jank. An early example would be these melon rats here, the first enemies that players will likely run up against, and the solid wall that blocked progress for me as a stupid little 9-year-old. Coming back to them with a better understanding of action titles, yeah, I was an RPG only boy for a long time, which is probably why this game was such a thorn in my side for 2 decades. But coming back with a propensity for action combat, the melon rats aren't too difficult to deal with. It turns out that the tried and true method from Kingsfield to Elden Ring is still held up in Evergrace. Strafe to avoid attacks and punish with a full-powered hit from behind. No animated backstabs, but coming from this angle at least gives some safety from trading blows too frequently. And in true FromSoftware fashion, the player will always lose in the war of attrition when trading blows. Then there are the bosses, which are somewhat few and far between. In fact, it's difficult to say exactly what qualifies as a boss here, considering that enemies like Dementia here have introduction sequences and post-death dialogue, but no giant health bar to mark their title as a quote-unquote boss encounter. That being said, this guy is certainly a boss, and a great example of what a boss fight mostly amounts to throughout the game. Without quick dodges or even a consistently reliable guard to turtle behind, boss combat usually passes in 2 steps. One is when the boss is attacking, sometimes with simple weapon swings or claw swipes, and other times with arena-spanning attacks that require careful positioning to not get completely bodied. This is then followed up by brief windows during the boss's recovery animation to get in a good punish or two. Honestly, while there's nothing quite at the thrill level of Artorias, Gale, or Godfrey, this is still very much an early blueprint for the combat that would make FromSoftware a household name a decade later. And with 2 unique characters to play as, the combat never gets too stale. Oh right, I haven't really mentioned the player character yet. Or should I say characters? Yeah, Evergrace follows 2 protagonists, Charlene and Darius, with the player being able to switch between the 2 at save crystals. While it's certainly possible to go through each character from start to finish one at a time before arriving to the final area, it is probably best to swap much more frequently, trading off the reins between Charlene and Darius between major milestones or when a puzzle or encounter has started to become a speed bump or a wall. Sometimes, a little time as the other character is exactly what you need to clear your head and reassess whatever is blocking progress. To put it in Kingdom Hearts terms, because I can't help myself, the story is better experienced more like Dream Drop Distance than Birth by Sleep. Speaking of the story, let's get to that, shall we? Yeah, so the story is, let's go with light on plot, heavy on atmosphere. Again, something to be expected from this developer. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't a handful of narrative beats to speak of, only that the narrative itself isn't exactly front and center like more story-focused RPGs. In this way, Evergrace comes off a little more like Sekiro in how it presents its world and narrative. That all being said, this is where the video stops being about gameplay mechanics and starts being about that story. So if you're looking to avoid spoilers, then head to the timecode on screen right now. Or pause this video and go play it yourself. Don't worry, this video will still be around then. Alright, getting started now. Spoiler avoiders gone. Everyone else still here? Good, let's get started. So, considering that Darius is the character on the game's front cover, I go with him to start out my playthrough, and am immediately given a little bit of information about the world through a pretty decent voiceover.
Edinburgh. A continent that's home to a few people with strange marks called crests.
Although, as we arrive to the world of Rubain, the acting slides right into that old 2000s localized, pick someone from around the office quality.
I thought you were dead. Did you have an accident?
What? Who are you? Some kind of strange bird?
No, I'm human, just like you. My name is Chrysalis.
Truly, masterpiece theater. And that audio mixing, with the voices almost completely lost behind the music. It's like I'm playing Star Ocean 3 all over again. Well, with a little word from this floating spirit, we're ready to punch, kick, and dash our way to victory. Or I can pick up the sword that's right behind me, and get a free lesson on equipment from Chrysalis here. Who's Chrysalis, by the way? Not sure. She showed up to tell me this place's name and said she was trapped in her current form by demons. After the quick tutorial, I started looking around. Can't seem to pick up this flower for some reason, and we check the start again. Maybe there's someone here to talk to? Get a better lay of the land? Sir? He seems afraid of Darius for some reason. Specifically, of whatever mark it is that he's got.
Huh? That mark on your hand? You have the crest!
Very afraid. Maybe we can find someone else to talk to. Past these ruins, maybe?
Hey, you! What do you want? Go away. You bother me.
Well, fuck you too, old man.
Can I get to Castle Rubain from that cage?
Also, Darius, that's a gate, not a cage. 1 wall, not 4, buddy. Well, the old man sends us to check on his dog, which we do, and find a good boy sweater from the good boy. And heading back to the gate, we can see the old man is being attacked. Kill the monster, and we get the chance to move forward and head into Rubain Castle. Of course, we've still got that cursed mark, and the old man doesn't seem all too interested in talking after he notices it, closing the gate and locking us out from the starting area. Which sucks, because that had an infinitely refilling fountain that healed me. Anyway, it seems that this curse mark on our hand is indicative of the people who destroyed the Rubain Empire in the first place. Yep, it's another desolate kingdom, long past its former golden age. Now, that's the FromSoftware that I know and tolerate. I'll be honest, as much as I love the developer, the long-declined kingdom with minimal narrative weight to your action stuff is a little bland. perfect example, this guy seems very upset to see me show up in the room with the big chair he's been seemingly chilling in for the last century. So we kill him. Yep, not much else to it, and Darius doesn't really seem to care either way. Regardless, killing the big man gets us one step closer to the edge, and it gets us to the outskirts of Rubain Castle, where the entrance is blocked by a gate. Pick up some spheres that Snuggly the Crow stole and put in her various nests, and we're good to cross. And we get to hear from Chrysalis again, who tells us we need to go kill a demon that's taking control of the castle and sends us on our way. Boy, doesn't this place look like it'll be fun to explore, full of traps and chests and monsters? Not to mention, listen to this ambient music. It definitely doesn't have the ordinary FromSoftware feel for most Souls games, but it does give such a brooding, somber atmosphere to these locales. Honestly, a strong showcase from composer Kota Hoshino. Those of you coming from the Souls side of the fandom might not recognize his work as well, since he has taken more of a sound design role in later Dark Souls titles and ELDEN. But his most recent stint as composer was in Armored Core 6, although some of his best atmospheric work can be found in the Echo Knight series. It's a different kind of vibe from what most fans might be used to, with the almost windswept ambience throughout Dark Souls, combined with bombastic orchestras for the boss fights. But the music really does help get in tune with the world of Rubain, especially with so little text to focus on for the world building. With that, however, the castle is starting to get repetitive. I might need a break from this place. Let's go check how Charlene is doing. Once again, we're introduced with some flavor text over the curse mark.
In the blink of an eye, the world was conquered by the strongest military empire with magical Palmyra armaments.
Followed immediately by quite a bit more intrigue. Charlene wakes up with no clue how she got in this random house in the woods and is being seemingly cared for by a woman named Sienna. Going outside, we see Sienna talking to Morpheus and Trandon, our villains for the evening, game, and they make their villainy nature known by quickly blowing up the house Charlene was staying in. And abducting Sienna. Kinda. She chooses to go with, but it's reluctant, so I guess we're off to save her?
I've got to help her.
Yeah, that's right, Charlene. We do have to help her. Now, the start of the Charlene storyline is a bit different from the Darius one. It's kind of a super hard mode, since Charlene can only attack for the first hour or so with her kicks that barely do any damage. Like, it's not exactly a DS1 fist-only kind of run or anything, but it's certainly not as easy as Darius, who immediately starts with a sword. There's definitely no weapon that I could have gotten at this point to make combat easier or even possible. Ignore the white bow on the bed that suddenly appeared after the house got destroyed. It isn't real, and you can't fool me into thinking it is. Yeah, I can guarantee that this is one reason 9-year-old Prac couldn't figure this game out, because even at 32, I never found that bow. Which means I couldn't fight any of the monsters. Which also meant I couldn't earn money. Which also meant I couldn't buy any other weapons when I finally found the shop. So, anyway, let's go pick up this small flower. Huh, I remember not being able to grab it before as Darius. Interesting that I can actually grab it now. And hey, look, it makes the old man a lot nicer.
As thanks for the flower.
He even gives me the sword necklace that lets me progress.
You look a bit like my daughter. She's dead now.
And then makes things super awkward.
What are you doing?
And then stops me from taking Darius' sword. Then I guess in the timeline this must have all happened first, huh? Neat. I like the detail. Anyway, off to go unlock the next passage. Failed to notice the bow again and put the necklace on the lady statue. Although I suppose this would be more of a bust. Strange, she's not really that busty. Then we talk to this priest-looking woman, who I'm sure means us no harm at that bitch. Well, at least the game finally saw fit to give me a weapon. So weird that it never gave me anything before this. Absolutely no opportunities before these claws. Certainly not with a decent amount of range, too, which would be extremely powerful in this game. Anyway, some dead hentacles later. Wait, these things are called hentacles? Wow, fuck that bitch for real then. She literally dropped me in a human research lab with hentai monsters. She's fucking dead. Anyway, some dead tentacle monsters and a new good girl sweater and some traps for my first death later, and we are suddenly contemplating not finishing this game at all. Bad RNG means no more good girl sweater, but that's fine. I like the default look better anyway, although that still won't stick around for long. Eventually we find someone who isn't trying to kill us, Orladin, a royal. He's also looking for Morpheus, but he's too injured to do the searching himself. So, he lets us know that this place is Morpheus' lab, and that it's where he experimented to make the Palmyra armaments in the first place. Too bad for him. We'll be using them to hunt him down and put his head on a pike here. I know it's more of a halberd, but the sentiment is the same. A little more searching, and we indeed find Morpheus again. And that's when Charlene actually reveals her motivation. She's hoping that if Sienna can tell her how she got here, then that can help her get back home. In the meantime, Morpheus sicks Charlene's first boss on us, Amit. He's not too tough, although the arena doesn't allow for a lot of room to maneuver. However, some strafing and a lot of butt pokes later, and he goes down. Also, I definitely should have used this Palmyra action way earlier. Still haven't figured out the power of the triangle button yet. For now though, that feels like enough time as Charlene for one day. Let's head back to Darius. We left him in that castle, but I've got a fresh pair of eyes for it now. Checking some areas I hadn't explored before, I handed Gem off to a giant statue lady. Lots of statue ladies in this game. And we can start exploring the upstairs. Up here, we find the queen of the castle, Zenovius, turned into some type of half-woman, half-plant monster. Oh, and great, there's poison on the floor. Oh, and also great, she heals when I try to summon a tree on her face. Cool. Well, she's dead and we move on. Nothing phases Darius, it would seem. Moving on, we get a glimpse of the industrial level of machinery that makes the different parts of this castle move. That's some neat environmental storytelling there. And we meet Trandon, before he quickly disappears and seems to sick a monster on us. Now, most of the bosses up until this point have essentially amounted to strafe, bait out an attack, punish. Dementia here, however, mixes things up for the formula we've seen so far, as he has access to some powerful magic that spreads across the arena. That being said, strafe and hit still works for most of his attacks, so we do that until he's dead. Bullet hell or not. Now, would you look at that if it isn't Sienna? She seems to know more than she lets on, and certainly more than we do at this point. That's how we learned that the demon is after the curse mark that's been making people walk off cliffs at the sight of us. But, of course, Sienna isn't too keen on revealing the whole truth quite yet. Down below the castle, we meet with Chrysalis again, who suggests that we need to find the priest, who should be somewhere outside of the royal shrine, where we've found ourselves now. She also mentions knowing Sienna in some way, but is equally vague and gives no answers before disappearing again. Awesome! Here in the royal shrine, we have my favorite dungeon in the game. It's a bit of a maze, and it can be pretty easy to get lost. But keep an eye on the map at the top right and pay attention to door colors, and it'll all start to make sense eventually. See, the puzzle here involves hitting various symbols with the opposing types of magic in order to unlock doors of various colors. I'm simplifying the explanation here because it's a puzzle well worth figuring out for yourself. Even if you don't mind the story spoilers, I'm not going to spoil the puzzles. But the result is a locale that you become intimately familiar with, even as the halls all seem to blend together. It's kind of a trippy experience to explain, and works as a complex area puzzle with tons of different parts and layers. Hit the symbols with the right spells in the right order, and we can unlock some cool treasure, as well as a lift that only works when wearing guard armor, since it's the guard lift. Yeah, that one took me a hot minute. At the top of the lift, we find the priestess who sent Charlene to the hentai monster dungeon. She's pretty vague about what she knows, and sends us to go find Morpheus. Then she lets us know that to do that, we need to go on a fetch quest, this time to pick up something called the Royal Medal. With that information in hand, Darius finds himself somewhere awfully familiar. Was this where Charlene started? Yeah, and here's the rubble blocking the path back to that starting fountain. Well, give that rubble a nice crush with our hammer that breaks rocks and such, and we're right back to the beginning. Ooh, that is some tasty FromSoftware design right there. Well, while we're here, let's go look around. Maybe we can find that old man and give him a smackdown for talking shit to us before. Oh, looks like someone already beat us to the punch there. Thanks for the helmet, I guess. Man, it's kind of a downer. Let's go check on Charlene. Maybe she's having a better time than Darius. So, Charlene's still in the research lab, right where we left her. Next for her, we need to take a Biliana fruit we found earlier. We also learned that the Biliana trees are sacred in Rubain, with the people here having previously worshipped them. Now, however, they are part of these crazy experiments and seem to power much of the Palmyra armaments and other technology we've been finding around the room, including a transporter, which we can activate after running some experiments on a fruit to create a transport Palmyra. This takes us to a new section of the lab, where the puzzle is much the same as the Royal Shrine. Find a series of multicolored seals and hit them with the opposing elements to unlock a series of statues. That then lets us take another transporter to another section of the lab, where we meet a woman who doesn't give us her name, and tells us to teleport ourselves from the west hall of the lab. We head there and are, you guessed it, transported again. Now we're in the underground research lab. Yeah, this is where the weird stuff happens, where Morpheus keeps his creepy fetish shit. From here, all we gotta do is spelunk through some caves until we arrive to a statue wearing blue, and need to arrive wearing the same. Not the exact same gear, but the same blue color at least. The whole outfit though. One piece won't do the trick. This then gives us the left wing key, one of the dual wing keys needed to progress. Then the second is past a miniature poison swamp and through a room with a giant mirror. Anyone who's played Legend of Zelda probably knows what happens next. We find ourselves in mirror form enough times until a door opens and we get the right wing key. Awesome. Let's plug that in and be on our way. A few hallways later, we find Sienna again, although she doesn't exactly seem herself. She's not answering our calls, and Morpheus speaks cryptically from the fucking rafters or something, because he's nowhere to be seen. After a brief fight with this Sienna, or maybe a Sienna clone? Not exactly sure. Morpheus laughs, speaks cryptically, and then sends me directly to the next location, where I'm immediately killed when a spider lady explodes me off of a cliff. Guess who gets to do the Sienna fight again? Anyway, here's the abandoned road, now making prolific use of save states, because that was annoying as hell to have to replay. I do my best to keep my feet on the ground and my butt out of the lava pools. Oh, and I kill every one of Quailag's sisters that I can find, and their little babies too. Few twists and turns through the fiery caves and we find Red Breeze, a man who seems to have a grudge against Morpheus and attacks us thinking we're associated with him. This is actually one of the more difficult boss fights so far. Mostly because he's one of the more aggressive. However, bullying him into a corner does the trick and we move forward. Turns out, Red Breeze has a crest of his own, and as such, was shunned for being cursed. He then spends the last of his power to send Charlene off. Somewhere else, I guess. To the Soaring Tower, that's it. Yeah, that place. I remember hearing about it somewhere, probably on a wiki or story explained video, because no one said shit about it in game yet. Well, with that done, it might be time to return to Darius. Charlene's had her adventures, it's man time now. And what does the man do? He, gets lost in the forest again. We'll figure this out, don't worry. There we go. Back to where Charlene's playthrough started. Here we find Chrysalis, who gives us a bit of a hint that we need royal privileges to get the medal we're looking for. Okay, not really a lot of help, but it's a start. The long and short of this is that it's another costume challenge. Get decked out in full royal gear, and go talk to this royal statue that transported Charlene to the human experimentation lab in the first place, who then proceeds to attack us. Hell, this thing goes beyond attacking and starts to completely wreck our face. This guy attacks fast, has barely any telegraphs, and seemingly can't be guard broken. It's by the grace of my 1,000 health potions that I actually managed to survive and walk away with the royal medal. So, what do I do with this now? Ah yes, take it to the priestess woman. Should we still be trusting her? Too late now. We're transporting again, and she's gone forever. Onward to the ice cave. Yeah, for as much as the circle back from the original forest to the castle and back again was a nice piece of interconnectivity, this game really makes use of a lot of teleports that simply drop the player at the start of a dungeon. Anyway, ice cave. What we do here? Well, we get knocked off a ledge and die. That's what we do. But it's fine. We'd already found a save crystal. No save states needed for this one. Continuing through the cave, this is a pretty well-designed level as well. A bit more interesting than the abandoned fire cave, at least. The puzzle here is to hit these giant icicles with fire spells in order to make them fall into place and give Darius a path to walk across. Then it's another fashion puzzle, only this time it's weapon flavored. We need the majestic sword to pass. These puzzles are kinda neat. Kinda wish the later Souls-like games would play around with fashion souls like this more. Aside from the obtuse humanity puzzle in DS3's Ringed City. or the Be Naked one for Elden Ring's Frenzied Flame questline. Well, now that we're through the cave, we come up to meet Chrysalis again, and it would appear that we've finally found Morpheus, and he's got Charlene with him for some reason. Weird, I don't remember standing still behind the old man. Something doesn't seem quite right here. And revelation time! It would appear that the brooding angst that Darius has been holding onto this whole time comes from a nasty secret with Charlene, when Darius apparently killed her. More mystery, and still no answers, huh? Anyway, we confront Morpheus, get no answers, and are immediately thrust into another boss fight. This time against a monster called Drawwide. These bosses are starting to get a bit tougher now, not being quite as strafable as before, but the same tactic does still stand. Run around their side, bait out an attack, and hit them from behind while they recover. All the same, the power of bringing a ton of potions to the fight gets us through. Although Drawwide is a sore loser and sends us crashing down into the abandoned road through the power of a cutscene. Fortunately, Chrysalis helps us to our feet, and we can start exploring. Here we find a wounded man, the same guy we met as Charlene, good old wounded ELDEN, still hurt and still dying. He gives us a MacGuffin, and we move on, before reiterating that Darius is somehow responsible for Charlene's current misfortunes, by killing her apparently. Well, MacGuffin in hand, we head out and eventually make it to the boss of the dungeon, the Djinn. This one isn't quite as interesting as Drawwide. Instead, the Djinn kind of swings his hammer slowly, hits us with the world's worst hitbox, and then stands there waiting for us to magic him to death. If there's some other kind of trick to this fight, I never figured it out, so ice spells it was until finally the boss goes down. If this is the intended method, then yeah, this might be one of the worst bosses in this whole game. Otherwise, I would love to know how we're actually supposed to fight him. With the Djinn dead though, we can keep moving forward so that Sienna can give us some exposition about the crests, essentially telling us that the crest allows bearers to mess with the natural order of things, swallowing themselves and the people around them in the flow of time. Essentially, as long as we've got these crests, we'll always find turmoil and always cause trouble for ourselves and others. Nothing really concrete, but kind of reasserting what has been the constant state this whole time. Let's let Darius ponder those questions for a bit. For now, we've arrived at the Soaring Tower, the same place we left Charlene off at, so it's about time for a change of pace. Here, our first puzzle is to talk to a broken statue with only shoes on, and no other armor. And then we're thrown into a murder gauntlet. Fun stuff. From here, we need to complete a series of dress-up puzzles, all matching statues in various locations in order to open doors and hidden passageways. Some of the statues we even need to put together ourselves, piece by piece. Story-wise, it's an uneventful trip through the tower, gathering up pieces of the statue puzzle and traveling back and forth quite a bit. Grab some treasure, fight monsters, repeat ad nauseum. After a while, we do find a boss, but it is essentially an ice version of the Djinn from Darius' playthrough. This one is called Banta Ice, and it is about as boring as the last one. Ranged attacks on repeat for an hour to slowly dwindle this boss down. Again, if there was a gimmick to this fight that I didn't quite get, then maybe it could be more interesting that way. But otherwise, it's pretty much a giant waste of time. But once we're past it, we arrive at Morpheus' secret lab. Arriving to the lab, Morpheus seems to have Sienna trapped behind some type of glass wall, but a light is starting to break her free, right as Trandin arrives to back Morpheus up. And that's the end of Charlene's storyline. Time to head into Darius. Yeah, so it turns out that the final section requires playing through both characters entirely before getting to the end. I wasn't entirely sure if this was going to be the case when I started playing, but I had a hunch, and it seems to have paid off. Time to finish up Darius then. Well, we've been through the Soaring Tower once already, and the second verse is the same as the first. There are some variations on a handful of puzzles, but for the most part, this level plays out fairly similarly. Play dress up with statues, survive some enemy gauntlets, and climb the big tower in order to reach the top and confront Morpheus at his lab. Not much to speak of, but I do find my favorite weapon of the game here, Quano's axe. With the way stamina works in this game, strong single-hit weapons are king, and Quano's axe is among the strongest. Truly a beauty of a weapon. Oh, and look, we found another giant boss that we have to fight at a distance while avoiding its attacks. Again. Not my favorite boss design, kinda sucks how many times it gets reused, but we muscle through and patience wins out the day, even mine somehow. And now things get a little weird, because now Darius arrives to Morpheus, only to find that Charlene is being held behind the glass, and Sienna and Trandin are nowhere to be found. Alright, time to finally fight Morpheus. He's a tricksy little shit, loves to teleport and blast me with magic. In fact, he seems to teleport the second you come too close if he isn't already in an attack animation. So bait and punish, hit and run, the tried and true tactic of Evergrace. The fight goes on forever, and when the fight is done, the fucker laughs like he's won.
Oh, yes. My glorious AI crest.
Oh look, it's Sienna. And it seems like she's the demon? Like the one Darius has been hunting until he realized Charlene was here? Then Morpheus throws some shade, gives Sienna a Sophie's choice, and has a seizure until he dies. Cool. That explained a lot.
What's going on?
Yeah, I'd like to know myself. Alright, that explained exactly nothing, except maybe suggesting that Trandon is Sienna's son, but like, it's hard to even say what Trandon's role in the story has been so far. He's kind of been showing up periodically, but he doesn't do much after blowing up the house Charlene was resting in. Beyond that, he's some kind of super-powered and a potential victim of Morpheus' meddling. Well, regardless, it's time to fight, and I go challenge Trandon as Charlene. The fight is very pretty. Makes me think of the Gehrman fight from Bloodborne. What with the field of white flowers on a hill, an expanding landscape of nothingness extending out into the distance. Aside from that, it's a pretty straightforward encounter. Wait for his cycles while he floats into the air to attack, then smack him once he drops to the ground again. He's got a lot of health, so repeat ad nauseum. It's more tedious than anything, but eventually Trandon goes down, sounding like a frickin' toddler when he fades into light. Kinda feels cruel to kill him, but the game demands it. For some reason. With Trandon dead, it's time to fight Chrysalis. This time as Darius. Seems fitting, to be honest. The trick here is a little more intricate, but still fairly tedious. Chrysalis basically has two attacks, one being to send an orb flying towards Darius, and the other being to remove one of the hexagonal floor tiles that make up the arena. Theoretically, this actually puts a timer on the fight, since Darius simply dies if he falls through the holes left behind by the dropping tiles. That being said, with enough damage, Darius can smack Chrysalis once after each attack, and finishes with dozens of tiles to spare. A neat gimmick, but like Trandon, drawn out by a massive health bar. Or maybe I hadn't been powering up my stuff enough. That could always be the issue. Either way, it's a test of patience that I somehow pass. Then the game wraps up with a quick cutscene where Sienna passes her powers off to Darius, hoping that he and Charlene together can break the cycle that she's mentioned a few times before now. And our heroes bury the fallen before heading off into the sunset. So, what exactly was this plot we've gone through? Well, from the best I can put it together, sometime in the not-too-distant past, the kingdom of Rubain once worshipped and revered the Biliana trees, mystical fonts of spiritual power that bloomed throughout the empire. However, when Morpheus discovered that he could use the fruit of the Biliana trees to create energy, the kingdom industrialized through this newfound power. Hence all of the mechanical technologies we saw in the castle. This also allowed the Rubain kingdom to overtake the world with powerful military might granted by the Palmyra armaments. However, the experiments with Palmyra didn't stop with the armaments and mechanical inventions, but extended to human experimentation. It's hard to tell if this is what created the cursed marks, or if that is the work of the demon Sienna. But the two are intertwined, and the monsters that now roam the land are certainly a result of tampering with Palmyra. This caused Rubain to fall into disarray, as the king and queen were attacked and fused with the monsters that rose up out of the secret labs below the castle. By the time the player arrives, Rubain is a cursed land, covered in monsters with few humans still left alive. Among them is Morpheus, who's continued his studies and has taken Sienna's son as his latest test subject, while he also tries to find a true crest bearer to experiment on. This is where Charlene's story starts, as Sienna has recently summoned both Charlene and Darius to Rubain in order to hopefully defeat Morpheus and free her son Trandon. This is what leads both protagonists on their quick trek through the puzzle-filled labyrinths that make up Rubain Castle and the surrounding caves, labs, and hell dungeons. Then finally, when Darius confronts Morpheus, this catalyzes the various magical entities into motion, possibly kickstarting the cycle that Sienna won't stop talking about, which is why now we have to kill Trandon and Chrysalis. Although the Chrysalis part is pretty much completely unexplained, but at least she's kinda cool about it. So yeah, I don't really understand the story, if it's not clear by now, and most of the interesting stuff happened before the game even started. Neat lore, but the narrative itself is pretty lacking. Well, hello again, spoiler-averse folks. Welcome back to the video. You didn't miss much. Haagen-Dazs, right? Ha ha ha. Oh, right. You weren't here for that. Well, I mean, you didn't miss much in the way of story. Lots of great jokes. Guess you'll have to go back and watch it later, after you play the game for yourself. Hold up. I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, conclusion time. I already talked about the combat for a while, and certainly complained about a lot of the later bosses. So, where would that leave me as far as a rating for the game? Well, I think a number system will make things difficult as I continue to check out these retro titles. Like, what happens if I give Evergrace a 46, but then decide that Brave Fencer Musashi is a better game, but it gets a 45? Like, no. That's why I'll essentially be leaving off with the Myers-Briggs agree-disagree formula. The spectrum will be must play, worth a try, meh, give it a pass, and kill it with fire. In the case of Evergrace, I'm going with worth a try, with a caveat. If you're a major Dark Souls fan and also like retro titles, then it is absolutely a must-play. Honestly, I'd recommend this before Kingsfield in that regard, since it's a lot closer to the modern titles than that OG series is. Still, as much as some of the later bosses kinda irked me, the combat system is very clever. It's definitely not as fast-paced as Sekiro or Elden Ring, but it keeps the tension high while trying to jump in real quick and get a heavy hit in. For someone who likes the Charge R2 colossal weapons in Elden Ring, Evergrace almost feels purpose-built for me. I'd love to see that risk-reward built directly into the health and stamina meter somewhere else. Honestly, I might even give the game another playthrough in the future. Punches and kicks only might be boring, but it might be something to do with these Palmyra actions. But hey, that's a story for another time. See you soon. Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. I wanted to leave off today talking about the new Patreon we opened up. For anyone who wants to support the channel directly, you can head through the link in the description and sign up for any of our tiers. All tiers will get you your name written in the end credits of each video as long as you're a member, and anyone who pledges $5 or more gets their name read out like the following. Azul. Thank you. DevBox has bigger and better plans for the future, and that is all made possible by your viewership and support.